We do have quorum. I'd like to call this meeting of Finance and Corporate Services to order. There is one consent item moved by Councillor Galloway Seelock. Any questions on the consent item? Councillor Yaneski.
Not really a question. I'm in agreement with the recommendation. I remember this issue was brought up at the AMO conference back last year, one of the sessions that I attended, and that was a concern that was being expressed across municipalities of the implication on decisions of court decisions. So I'm prepared that we move forward on this.
Yeah, I'd echo that as well. Very happy to see this before us. So with that, we'll take the motion's been moved. Those in favor? And opposed? It's carried. Okay, we'll move on to item number 2, the annual inventory of agreements and contracts. Ms. Tarlin.
Through you, Mr. Chair, staff is bringing this report forward as per the existing council policy. Currently, contracts and agreements are subject to a defined delegated authority process which requires scrutinizing of contracts and agreements before being signed off on. We estimate that there's about 30 hours of staff time now involved with doing the actual inventory. So given the time involved in doing the inventory and the somewhat redundancy of the particular process review in place, staff is recommending reliance on the delegated authority that's already in place and asking for repeal of the current policy.
Thank you. Questions, Councillor Galloway Seelock.
I actually don't have a question. I just have a suggestion. Maybe staff can comment on the implications that it may have. I'm just thinking that while I agree we don't need it every year, maybe it would be good to have it once at the beginning of a term, just so that the council can understand what kind of agreements are in place. Understanding that it does take probably 30 hours to collate it. Would that? I'm assuming that would be better than what we have now. Would that be? I'm trying to turn it into a question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, certainly if that's something that council desires to have at the beginning of every term, just so that there's sort of a baseline for moving forward, certainly staff could put that together, understanding, of course, that the repeal of this policy would then mean that staff would continue through the delegated process to approve all the contracts and agreements.
Right. I think that's all my questions. Do you want me to comment now, or?
Yeah, there's only one other.
Okay.
So please.
I just think it's. Well, I don't see any problems with what's in place or with the authority that staff have. I just think it's important for council, once every 4 years to understand what's in place and what we're dealing with moving forward. Because there is significant costs that are attributed to these agreements and contracts. So I would like to see that it not be repealed but be changed to council being brought to council at the beginning of each term.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if I may just comment as well, remembering, of course, that there may be a possibility that what comes forward at the beginning of the council term may have changed by the time the new council would come on board. So,
okay, Councillor Gazzola.
I have a question and a comment. Okay,
please.
Yeah, I was just looking at this on page 220. The lease agreement with the region to do with McLennan Park. Now it says here it's expired October 31st, 55. What does that mean?
Can anyone comment on that?
Or is that 2055?
2055, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. If that's what it is, I guess. The other question I had, I was looking for the agreement we have with Waterloo University, with Laurier, where we give them parking at the old St. Jerome's, or they're at the old St. Jerome's, and we've had a parking agreement, and I don't see it here.
Could anyone speak to that? Would the WLU parking agreement be part of this? Is it? Where's that? Sorry. 22. Yes, memo of understanding, page 22, Councillor Gazzola.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just make a quick comment.
Please.
I personally would like to see this stay in place. I would have thought it's in a digital format, sort of a register that one could access at any time. This is a public document, is it not? Or public document? They're public.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the only format that it's in currently is in an Excel spreadsheet. We don't have a database in place for this at that moment, if that's what you're referring to as a digital
Well, even if it's
format.
in an Excel spreadsheet, if it's left there, if it's there and maintained, you don't have to print it up all the time. But I think it's a good information that should be readily available to us. I just think I can't see there being that much effort to keep it up. I mean, the basis is there. So.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the effort for keeping it up is really not so much to do with the format that it's in, but the fact that staff need to go back and review the contracts themselves and keep them up to date and touch base with one another. So that's really more where the effort is with respect to reviewing the actual contracts themselves and making sure that the spreadsheet's up to date.
Yeah, but they have to do that whether we have a spreadsheet or not. They have to. I think it helps if you've got a spreadsheet that at least lists everything that needs to be done.
No, the recommendation is to not do it, so that would save the 30 hours a year of staff time preparing it. And Councillor Galloway-Sealock mentioned possibly moving that to once every 4 years, essentially, to update council. So that would save presumably 30 hours for those 3 years that it wasn't.
And then is it going to take 120 hours every 4 years to update it then?
That's, yeah. Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Gazzola?
No.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, I was trying to understand this whole intent of the repeal, and I've read the report, and then there's a lot to digest in terms of the attachment of all the agreements, and I found it very, very fascinating to read this. I knew we've had lots of agreements, but this is the first time I recall seeing all this, and I think it was important that we have this on a regular basis, and so. I know there's questioning that has been done by two previous councillors. By repealing it, I'm trying to understand what does the word repeal mean in terms of, and what savings, I mean, we're saving 30 hours, you're saying, but what is the purpose of the repeal and what does it impact on me or in council?
The purpose of the repeal, through you, Mr. Chair, is to rely on an already delegated authority process for the approval of contracts and agreements. The way in which the policy is currently written, there is an inference here that council is going to be the ones to be looking at all of these contracts and agreements, and a responsibility on council with respect to those agreements and those contracts. At this moment in time, with the delegated authority that we have, legal staff and departmental staff, divisional staff are looking at these agreements, and they're following the purchasing bylaw with respect to all of these contracts and agreements before anything is even entered into. So there's a redundancy with respect to bringing forward this list on an annual basis to council.
So have we been receiving this annually before?
Through you, Mr. Chair, we were supposed to be producing these on an annual basis, yes.
But we haven't received it. This is the first time for this term.
I can't speak to that, given that I'm new in the role of the clerk.
Mr. Chapman.
Through Mr. Chair, it is my understanding that Linda Carabo does do this annually, so this has been received in each of the previous years of Council's term. And I think that's the point, that while there's interesting information here, to our knowledge over the past 10 years, Council's never taken any action or given any substantive direction to staff based on this document.
I wouldn't see any need for any action, because I know staff, when an agreement needs to be revised or it expires and it needs to be redone or new terms or whatever, it usually comes back and some direction is given through council at that point in time. And I know you got like hundreds of agreements here, but you know, I think the Councillor Gazzola mentioned that we should have something that we can maybe just see somewhere. You know, online or something like that internally, that we have access to review or just to look at if we have any concerns. That's it.
Through you, Mr. Chair, if you look at the first paragraph of the purpose for the policy, it does talk about council being given the opportunity to consider and determine the appropriateness of an extension, renewal, or amendment. So from that perspective, it's looking at council to make sure that these contracts are being extended, renewed, or amended. What we're saying is that there's already a delegated authority in place with respect to all of that. So from an information perspective, there may be value in council having it, but from a requirement of council to take action, then this policy would need to be amended or repealed accordingly.
Mayor Zaire?
Thanks very much. I have seen these, obviously, basically on an annual basis, and while it is interesting to go through and occasionally, it really is, you either believe in delegated authority or you don't, period. You either want to be a management person or you want to be a council, member of council. And those things that are delegated to staff should remain there. If you don't want that, then you remove the delegation. I think that is going way beyond what this council is there to do. This council is there to make policy. And when there are agreements that need to be brought forward to this council, they're brought forward, and we have the debate of those. I like Councillor Galloway-Seelock's suggestion in terms of once a term from the standpoint of an information and education perspective for members of council. I think that's a good one. But to have it on an annual basis is crossing that line. It's got nothing to do with transparency, because that's what will obviously be talked about from some people, transparency and accountability. Our accountability is to make sure that the delegated authority is correct and that there isn't anything untoward. Then we allow staff to do their thing. I'm assuming that Councillor Galloway-Seelock will put forward a motion to amend the recommendation, and I would support what she has put there and what she's suggesting.
Councillor Inez?
I would agree with the comments from Mayor Zaire, and I just maybe we could put in there that it's in one of our O drives that we can look at at our leisure whenever we want, just to see whatever the updated version is. But the one question I do have is, with this work, does it not keep us on our toes on monitoring our contracts? Like,
through you, Mr. Chair, we're not suggesting that we would not continue to have this inventory. We're just suggesting, and you're right, we want to make sure that we're being kept on our toes, and it's good to have something that keeps us with all of the agreements in line. It's just a question of whether or not we're going to do this on an annual basis, bringing it forward to council.
okay. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fernandez?
Thank you. There were a couple of ones that talk about memorandum of understanding with no cost. So that's really, can you help me just understand what that means? So I guess one of the ones that I like the Earth Day memorandum of agreement on 2-11 with Earth Day. There's another one with the House of Friendship. It talks about a memorandum of understanding. I just need to understand what that means.
Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't know specifically what the Earth Day Agreement is. I suspect what it is we use branded materials for our Earth Day events, and so we would need to enter into a memorandum of understanding to be able to use those types of things.
Okay, so there's no cost. It's really just an agreement that we would use. Okay.
That's
all
correct.
Right. Okay. I do think it's important for us to have some additional eyes on these kind of agreements, and I do appreciate that the clerk's office has probably been doing a fairly good job of keeping everything pretty tight. I would agree with Councillor Galloway-Seelock that we should have at least an opportunity to go through this. You're saying 4 years? Is that what you were saying? At the beginning of each term, which is a time when most councillors may not have a good understanding. But at some time in the 4-year term, we should definitely have eyes on it.
And Councillor Gazzola?
Yeah, I now have a little better understanding of what we're talking about. I have no problem with the delegation of authority. That's, and I didn't see this listing as inferring that council had to take over authority for it. I look upon it solely as a piece of information which I would like to have available at any time to look at. It's just information. It's the same sort of thing that now we have. You've done a tremendous job with minutes and of all our meetings and all that. And it's to be able to go back and look at something if there's a question without having to bother staff. And so to me, it's purely a source of information. Got nothing to do with challenging the responsibility as to who has the right to do what. That's not a question.
Okay, I have no further questions. I'll just Councillor Glenn Graham.
Yes, thanks. So, Ms. Tarling, I'm just trying to understand whether this could be put in a format that's available on the O Drive, or would it be requiring the same 30 hours of work?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can investigate what it would take for us to be able to make this available to council at any time.
Because I agree, it's not a question of oversight or control, it's just a question of interest and access to that information. So I think you've heard that there's an interest from some councillors. It would be nice to have. I can support the once a year review coming forward to council to use our time to review this, but I think it would be nice to have from a transparency point of view that information available if you could bring back something in the near future. Thank you.
Okay. Once a term was the comment. Okay, so I have a couple questions then. Firstly, I'm concerned we might be going in the opposite direction. Perhaps you can comment, Ms. Tarling. If we're starting to talk about having this updated constantly on the O Drive, my first thought would be this would be creating more work, not less. Is that... Mr. Chapman, do you want to comment?
Through the chair, yes, it's my understanding that the list that you've got in front of you is prepared once a year, that there is no consolidated list of contracts apart from what is prepared for this purpose, and that if you look at any one division, there may be 4 or 5 contracts in that area. So I'm looking at bylaw enforcement, for example. They have 4 of them. We have no doubt that bylaw is on top of their 4 contracts. They watch the renewals. They understand them very carefully. The point here is about doing quality control at a corporate level to basically consolidate the inventory. So I would agree with you that if your expectation is to have a list that's maintained in real time, that will be a new process, and that will take time to prepare and maintain. We have no doubt that the contracts are being watched by people that are accountable for them. This is only about consolidating that list and reporting it to council once a year, and now your suggestion is once per term.
Okay. And I had a very similar thought to Councillor Galloway-Seelock coming into this. I just want to be clear, though, if we did move to the once every 4 years, that would lessen the workload. It would be once. Okay, very good. So I'll just comment briefly as well. As I said, I think the once every 4 years approach is appropriate. It is a good information item, knowledge, learning item for council, but I don't think there's much, I personally don't see much value extending beyond that. I completely respect micromanagement, but I don't think that really helps in this situation. This is more of an efficiency piece. So I think, honestly, staff's work hours could be better spent in other items. So I will go to Councillor Galloway-Seelock if you'd like to bring the motion forward.
Yeah, and it can be tweaked, but basically I just wrote down that council policy I-180 be amended to provide council with a copy of the list one time in every 4-year term.
Is everyone clear on the motion? Okay, comments? Councillor Yaneski.
Yeah, based on Councillor Gallery-Zilok's motion, does that imply that there will be nothing online in terms of an inventory being kept there? But only a paper copy once every 4 years?
Well, sorry if I can just interject you quickly. In fairness to all of our items are posted online anyway in PDF format and are there in perpetuity, but Councillor Gallery-Zilok.
My intent is not to have staff reviewing it every year, because the whole intent of what staff has brought forward is to decrease the workload and the redundancy. And I don't think myself, and I'm purely speaking for myself, that I need to have something updated online, because I don't think I would use it. So there's, in my opinion, staff don't need to do that work. So the intent of my motion is just for council to see it once every year. And if there's questions, once every term, thank you. If there's ever questions that council want to bring forward on anything, they always have the right to do that throughout the course of the term.
Okay. Those in favor? And opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll move on to the car share line of credit. We do have a delegation for this item. Mr. Jason Hammond.
That's it. Good to see you. Goodbye.
Okay, Mr. Hammond, welcome. Just a reminder, you do have 5 minutes for your presentation.
Okay. Thank you. Chair Davey, Mayor Zaire, members of council, great to see you. I'm here today just to give you a bit of a presentation regarding Report 53 before you today. So what you see here is a bit of a map of our service area where it stands today. It has grown substantially since the last time we addressed this council 5 years ago. We have now 37 cars in our fleet, 23 of which are here in Waterloo Region, and the majority of that is here in the city of Kitchener. We were founded here in Kitchener, and it's been 16 years running now, since 1998. As you can see, we also have a vehicle in Elmira. In a nutshell, we are a nonprofit cooperative with the task of allowing citizens to avoid car ownership by replacing that with our fleet. So we put vehicles in service around the city. Our members use those vehicles, reserving them online, accessing them with a smart card, and paying only for the hours and kilometers that they drive. So our job is to connect a fleet of vehicles with a group of friends. When we started, it was one 10-year-old Tercel and 10 friends, and now it is 37 vehicles, and of course, over 1,000 friends. So up in the top left corner there, you will see a screenshot of our recent orientation video. Matthew Piggott is pictured there. He's our member services manager, and he joins me in the gallery today. In that video, we do highlight the importance of our connections with other modes of transit. Our purpose as an organization is to encourage transit usage, cycling, other active modes, other green choices, and to give our members the flexibility to do so and to reduce their expenses. In the top right corner, that is us with the Woolwich Township Volunteer Fire Department. A few years ago, when we retired our last really old vehicle, we retired them much earlier now, we donated it to the fire department, and Conestoga College students had an opportunity to learn how to use rescue tools and tear it to bits, which was lots of fun. You can see the logo for TMMC there. We do have more than half of our fleet later this summer. It'll be over 2/3 of our fleet built in Waterloo Region at TMMC in Cambridge. Toyota Corollas and Matrixes, which are really ideal car sharing vehicles. So we're happy to put our fleet on a 100-mile diet, so to speak. We are Bullfrog powered. We have an electric vehicle stationed here in Kitchener that is 100% renewably powered by Bullfrog Power. We are members of the Canadian Federation of Car Sharing Cooperatives. In fact, we provide leadership, hold the presidency for that, and the head office is right here in Kitchener for all of the car sharing cooperatives that serve from Nanaimo to St. John's. So we're proud to do that and to have hosted the conference last year. The Car Sharing Association, CSA, is the big tent global industry association, and we also hold a directorship with that. So we've been around for 16 years. We were Ontario's first, and we're quite proud of that. So getting into some figures for you, here you can see our trend of membership from 2004 until last year. This year we are actually above that trend line again. So you can see that our driving members and our total membership is growing quite exponentially. So the reason we're here to speak about the credit tool that the city has advanced to us in the past is to really facilitate our ability to keep up with that increasing growth in demand. We don't do a lot of marketing. What we do is education, and pretty much as fast as citizens can figure us out, they're joining. So it's allowing us to grow very quickly. And in fact, if you relate this with our vehicles, we would expect that by about 2018, when we celebrate our 20th anniversary, when the region has been transformed with light rail transit and the ABRT in Cambridge and the new I-Express routes throughout Kitchener and Waterloo, by that time we will probably have over 100 vehicles in service. So here is the matching diagram from our revenue. You can see it's growing in pace with our membership, which makes sense. But you'll also notice that the red line on the bottom there is our grant revenue, and it has fallen away to zero and remained there. We do run a self-sufficient business model despite being a nonprofit. We're incorporated as a cooperative without share capital. So in those times when we do make a profit, nobody takes it home. It just gets recycled back into improving the service and keeping rates affordable. In fact, we could never be sold the way we're incorporated. So it's a very stable community ownership and democratic function. So the City of Kitchener is a key partner of ours. Parking allocation actually is a leadership role with the City of Kitchener. You do carry the mantle of best practice for providing us with parking in all the municipalities we serve, which include Waterloo and Woolwich, Hamilton, Guelph, and we're launching in London in May. So you do have that best practice to be proud of. Corporate membership, City of Kitchener holds a corporate membership with us, allowing your staff to use our vehicles for work trips. In fact, we have one stationed downstairs in this building and throughout the downtown. And your staff are able to use those to get to their meetings, their site visits, get down to central operations, get to public information centers, and so on. The revolving line of credit is the reason for our delegation today. It's been around since 2002. We're looking for a renewal and an increase in the level available to us, but currently we have paid it back to zero ahead of time. There's also in the past been other support, such as back in the days of the LEAF Fund. There was a marketing program that we took advantage of. We collaborate closely with your TDM staff, and Kitchener, as I mentioned, was the host for our national conference last year. We share a lot of strategic outcomes around traffic reduction, poverty alleviation, promoting active living, reducing costs, protecting our air quality and our climate, and really supporting transit-supportive growth. So our request today is in the staff report before you, under the second option, choosing option A instead of option B, and going with a $50,000 revolving line of credit. So we have thus far paid thousands of dollars in interest to the city. The principal has been repaid ahead of time in full. It is not a grant, it is just a credit tool. We are community owned and democratically controlled. Our status as a co-op binds us by our members and also by Ontario legislation to a set of international principles that ensure that we remain community and democratically controlled. So we'd like to grow faster, we'd like to be able to keep up our pace of growth, and we need these kinds of tools to make that happen. It addresses our seasonality and our need for flexibility, and it is the same request that we are making of the City of Waterloo and the region of Waterloo. In fact, last week, the region of Waterloo, your peer committee, recommended to council there that they supersede the staff recommendation and go to $50,000, not $30,000. So it's the same request we're making of you today. So in brief, we're made in Waterloo Region, both physically, our fleet, but also as an organization, as Ontario's first car share. We're here to stay and we're here to help. We share a lot of those strategic goals. We're growing a lot stronger and we're growing very quickly, and we're looking for your support to maintain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. There are some questions, starting with Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I had some financial questions to ask. Can I ask those?
Sure. Thank you.
You're not concerned about confidentiality?
I'm sure it'll be fine.
Pardon?
Please go ahead.
The first thing I want to ask you, you're actually looking for a loan, not just a line of credit. You actually have a loan with the city now, not just a line of credit.
Through the chair, it is structured as a revolving line of credit so that we can withdraw and repay as allowable. And it's now been repaid to zero at this point in time.
So what, at this point, is there an amount owing to the city as we speak?
No, the balance has been brought down to zero. We delivered that check last week, actually, and it is due to end its term April 30th of this year. So that's why we're coming back to request a renewal. It was first established in 2002, ran until 2009, was renewed then, and is up for renewal again tonight.
Yeah, as members of council, we really haven't seen your financial statements nor your business plan. So I find it difficult to understand from the brief information that I have. From your charts, you show that your involvement and your so to speak ridership is up and your revenues are up. But what about the bottom line?
To speak to your point of confidentiality, we did share those full accounting documents and annual audits with your staff so that they could review them fully before making their recommendation. And we have had over the past 5 years some gains, some losses, but continuing improving performance over our last year. As we grow, we have a lot of efficiencies of scale. So our projection for this fiscal year, which ends at the end of this month, is a very negligible net loss, and we're budgeting for a net gain next year.
Yeah, but if we look at the accumulated picture, where do we stand?
Sorry, could you speak into the microphone, Councillor?
I'm sorry, I'm saying if we look at the accumulated picture, where do we stand?
I'm not sure of the figure at the moment, but we have done, just conceptually, we've done a lot of debt reduction in the previous year, of course, repaying the lines of credit owing to Kitchener and Waterloo and the region. But also we've transitioned our member plans away from a debt focus to a revenue focus. We've reduced the amount of member loan that members pay and increased their monthly fee so that we can shift away from owing our members their cost of joining back and having a more steady revenue stream.
Has the business plan been filed with the city?
I don't believe it's a formalized business plan. We did have a significant conversation with them about what our plans are and how we would be using the funds. Of course, they're only to support our growth here in Kitchener. And essentially we are growing our fleet, and that is the biggest cost. And we're scaling up to meet membership demand.
Do you have any creditors other than the local governments here? Do you have credit with banks or other institutions?
Primarily, our debt is controlled by the municipalities and by our membership.
Yeah, I'm quite concerned why all this information hasn't been made public, because you are coming to a public forum. You're not asking for a grant, but in a way you are. It's a different type of a grant, a reduced, or a line of credit where you're asking us to be your bankers. So, but when you ask the public organization to be your bankers, your information, to my thinking, has to unfortunately become somewhat public. Otherwise, if you go to private bankers, that isn't the case. So, to me, there's. You've been very candid. I don't, but there is a lot of information that I haven't seen and don't quite understand. And as a banker, really, I'm not in a position to say go one way or another.
Mayor Zaire.
Thanks very much. I had also a question related to a business plan, presumably for about a 5-year basis. Now, I understand from your answer that you have had some conversation with staff about a go-forward basis. How long does that plan move out? What period of time?
Well, through the chair, the The landscape for car sharing is changing very dramatically. A growth rate like ours of about 50% per year is actually relatively normal in our industry. So it can be difficult to project into more than a few years out exactly how much that growth will be. We are very confident that we're growing, but really these kinds of tools that we're asking Council to renew today are a governor on our rate of growth. So the more access we have to these tools, the faster we can respond to membership demand.
Okay, can you just refine that answer a little bit? How many years ahead have you projected, even though I accept what you said in terms of it's difficult to go long term, so how many years have you gone up?
With business as usual, we would project that in about 4 years' time, maybe 5 years' time, we would have between 100 and 150 vehicles in service, and likewise, perhaps 4,000 to 5,000 members. That's our best projection at this point. And of course, as we grow, we are finding increasing efficiencies. So we have more vehicles per staff person, more members per vehicle, and we've seen that hold true over the years as we've grown.
Okay, last question. What cities are you now in, and what support are you receiving from those cities or other cities?
We were founded here, so we were in Kitchener and Waterloo, have been for 16 years. We grew to Hamilton 5 years ago. Last year we expanded to Elmira, Guelph, and St. Catharines, and this year we are expanding to London. And in terms of this kind of support, it has been the practice of the City of Kitchener, the City of Waterloo, and the Region of Waterloo to provide parallel lines of credit over that time since 2002. So to date, they have been at the $30,000 level.
How much, sorry?
$30,000 level to date. Last week at Regional Council, of course, at committee, there was an approval to increase it to 50. That is the request we're making of all three local parties this time around. The City of Hamilton has provided us with a $150,000 line of credit. That's part of the argument for moving to 50 is that if the three municipalities here are sharing the same burden as a peer municipality like Hamilton, then that makes sense, and that also reflects the request we've made of the City of London.
So you made a request to London for 150, is that correct?
Yes, they're dealing with parking first because that is, of course, the priority as we look to launch, but we're working with their staff, and their staff are notifying their council of that eventual request for a $150,000 line of credit.
Okay, thank you. I may have some comments.
Councillor Ioannidis.
Through you, Chair Davey. Thank you, Mr. Hammond, for coming in today and offering up some of your comments and questions. One of the questions that I wanted to follow up upon, and I think it was read somewhere, or I don't know where I read about it, but how is the LRT going to impact your business model?
Through the chair, that's an excellent question. We consider ourselves two sides of the same coin with transit. Our model of car sharing, which is a fleet-based return trip model of car sharing, is specifically transit supportive. So without transit, our members wouldn't feel as comfortable giving up their car. And with us, they're more comfortable taking transit for the majority of their commuting needs and using us to fill in the gaps. So it's a very reciprocal relationship. And of course, the dramatic change that LRT will bring to transit will also be a benefit for us. We expect a lot more of our neighbors to be willing to give up their car when LRT is in the picture.
Okay. My other question is pertaining to, you'd mentioned it's in your car sharing association that it's relatively common of a 50% growth rate. Is that what you're experiencing with your organization, is a 50% growth rate?
Yes, that's right.
So currently you said you have 37 cars, right? Is that right? So you're expecting like 18, 19 cars for next year to be purchased?
Yes, in the coming 6 months, I would expect that we'll add about that many vehicles.
Okay. And you don't find that aggressive as a growth model?
Yeah, it is certainly aggressive. As I say, it's common across all of our peers in the industry, and we've also been experiencing that rate of growth for 3 or 4 years consistently. And really, it's scaling to demand. If our membership wasn't growing in accordance, we, of course, wouldn't be spending any money on fleet. But we're just responding to the uptake in the public.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Singh.
Thank you, Chair Davey, and thank you for coming before us with your presentation. And I think it's an important ask. And I'd like to hear, again, a bit of a summary. I came in a little bit of a tail end. My apologies if I missed this important aspect of it. If you were not to be able to get this increase, obviously the Region of Waterloo has already accommodated, but if City of Kitchener-Waterloo doesn't adjust as well, what would that limit with the expansion here in the local regional area?
So through the chair, that is essentially the more access we have to these kinds of tools and the amount available to us, the faster we can grow. So we are confident that we will grow, but how fast we're growing and how able we are to keep up with the pace demanded by our members depends on this kind of activity.
Is there a significant endeavor that you're trying to achieve, go forward basis that you can say, if this year we don't get this increase in the line of credit, immediately we will not be able to do these significant initiatives that you can actually pinpoint to? I can understand the overall expansion, but I'm saying put your finger on one or two items.
Conceptually, it just we would have to be tremendously cautious and disappoint a lot of our members in investing in fewer vehicles if we could not address our seasonality, for example. We do a lot less business in the winter than we do in the summer. As you can imagine, that's pretty common for most people's driving behavior. So that's something that we're addressing with this, is the ability to basically in the springtime address the fact that we've had our worst months of the year and we need to make all the investments for our coming best months of the year.
When you say fewer vehicles, how many fewer vehicles would you say?
The difference between a $30,000 line of credit and a $50,000 line of credit would be something like 8 vehicles fewer in terms of our growth capacity.
In 2014, would that be immediate?
Pardon me?
In 2014, is that immediate or is that over a few year time frame?
In each year, it would reduce our capacity to grow by about that much.
By 8 cars a year?
That's my sort of off-the-cuff estimate, yeah.
Okay, all right. And you've already mentioned that this is a local initiative where it's spun from, and obviously the reach is going out further, even, I guess, in other provinces as well. The ask that you guys made to Hamilton, the increase, what was the increase again from 158 was, what was it before?
It didn't exist before. We only grew to Hamilton 5 years ago. So they began their commitment at $150,000 line of credit.
Did they set any specific controls or any requirements of that 150 line of credit? Or
by memory, I believe there's a requirement that it be spent on resources to be used in the City of Hamilton, which is, of course, our practice anyway. Any line of credit made available by the City of Kitchener would be spent on resources.
Has the same requirement as well?
I believe it was, yes.
Okay, all right. And you've spoken about, you've given some expression of a business plan when dealing with your staff when this ask came forward. Has anything been kind of articulated as a solid document that can be forwarded to council?
It is quite difficult to do a multi-year plan because of our rate of growth and the flexibility there. So it depends. We know our ratios and our practices, but what we're doing is responding to neighborhood demand. So if we have a 30% increase in members or a 70% increase in members, we'll just be responding accordingly.
Okay. Mr. Chair, I have a question of staff as well. Can I ask now or later?
No, just we'll move to that in a moment. Still 3 people in the queue here. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thank you very much, Chair Davey. And Jason, I really appreciate you coming in because it does shed a lot of light on this for us, so thank you. Is this time sensitive, this issue, or could it be deferred to get some more information to April 28th, for instance?
Well, through the chair, I would want to make sure that your staff have enough time to process the update to the agreement and all that sort of thing. So by my understanding, the current agreement is ending April 30th. So to renew that, to have a new agreement in place, and to have the requisite signatures and everything, I would hope that out of today's meeting we could get that done so that there's a smooth transition there and your staff have time to react before the 30th.
Okay, so I will have a question of staff later on about this, but I understand about the difficulty in putting together a business plan, but it's still something I think that we're looking for in terms of the efficiencies you allude to, and there's a lot of goodwill here. You've earned that. But I think we're just looking for connecting the dots and trying to understand where this is headed. And that would be of some help to us if we could understand how you will get to profitability and Not that you've done a good job of repaying us, and don't get me wrong, but it just would give us some comfort as an organization trying to be do our due diligence for the corporation of the City of Kitchener. So I would be willing to ask a question of staff and then possibly move a deferral based on that answer.
Thank you. Councillor Etherington?
Just one quick question, Jason. You said you were clear of you'd paid off the line of credit. The report, unless I'm reading it wrong, which wouldn't be the first time, says the current balance on the line of credit is $7,000. Is that paid off?
Yes, that was repaid between the time the report was written and today. I believe that it was last week that those checks were delivered.
Smart move. Thanks.
In fact, we've done the same for the City of Waterloo and the region of Waterloo as well.
Councillor Yaneski.
In regard to the purpose and the mission of your car share program, basically it's to provide a vehicle to anybody here in Kitchener that belongs, that signs up to be part of this program, because the objective would be not to own a car, but to share a car and use it when you need it, and go wherever you have to do shopping, visits, or whatever. And that's its purpose, right?
Yes, effectively, it is splitting the fixed costs of car ownership 30 ways with your fellow members. We have about 30 drivers per car. So all of your insurance and depreciation and maintenance, it's a much more affordable way to have something equivalent to owning a car without all of the hassles and expense associated with that.
Right. I appreciate that. I mean, that's the objective. With the coming of the LRT, these people who use these vehicles, would they not want to use the LRT, because that may be an incentive to provide cross-town travel, which would mean there would be less intent on using car share? That's the I see as a vision in the future, but you're saying it's not. Why?
Through the chair, our growth expectations around LRT are very strong. So when LRT is implemented, the number of people living in Kitchener who will be willing to give up one of the cars they own will increase dramatically. In fact, some of our members even use car share to complete a trip. So they might board the LRT for the trip from Fairview Park Mall up to, say, the University of Waterloo, but then they might book a car there and drive into Beechwood or something like that. So it's that teamwork between transit and car share that really makes a difference. In fact, now that we've expanded to serve other cities, we see the same kind of behavior with highway coach and train service, where someone might take a train from Kitchener to London and then drive around London as they need, return the car to the station and take the train home. So that whole time they're spending less, they're emitting less pollution, and they're more productive with their time.
Do you have any statistical analysis to show whether the people that are using your program do not own a car right now, or do they have a car and don't have a two-car family, but just a one-car family, and participate this as a car share because it says, well, we don't need two cars, maybe doing the one car and then a car share is beneficial, or is there more people who just don't have a car?
So our own internal statistics show that about 40% of our members own another vehicle and we're their second car. North America-wide, the research out of UC Berkeley is that about 50% of people who join a car share either sell or avoid buying a car. And in total, they drive about half as much after they join. It's part of a shift in their lifestyle. They're more likely to combine trips and just be smarter about how they arrange the transportation for their household. So there is a significant decrease in driving and in the number of vehicles on the road.
Okay. Would you classify your operation as profit or non-profit oriented?
We're a non-profit organization in that the way we're incorporated under the Ontario Cooperative Corporations Act is without share capital. So our members do not have an ownership stake in the co-op. They have control over the co-op, but they can't sell their share or anything like that. And if we do make a profit, it has to get put back into the organization. Of course, we pay our staff salaries, but we don't have anyone taking the profit home. So in fact, if we ever decided to close down, we wouldn't be able to sell to anyone. We would have to dissolve and give all of our assets to another co-op without share capital.
Okay. And how many staff do you have in your organization?
We're in the process of hiring our 5th.
I'm sorry, how many?
5.
5, and you're one of them.
No, I'm a volunteer. I'm a director on the board. So our board is elected from the membership. So I'm serving as president, and we have 7 other directors that volunteer on our board.
Okay, so you got a board of 7 or 8, and they're all volunteers, but they're part of the share programming because they participate in it, right?
Yes.
Okay, and you have 5, and so what do the 5 salaried people do? Just administrate the paperwork?
Yes, we have an executive director. We have a senior administrator who runs the systems in the back end. We have a member services manager, Matthew, who supports our members in recruitment and retention and all the issues that might come up while they're a member. And then we have regional services coordinators, one in Hamilton, one in London, to be a jack of all trades there.
So how do you pay your salaries for those 5 people? From sort of the profit margin? Or if you're saying not profit, I don't know.
Much like any small business, it's out of the dues that our members pay. So out of the hourly and monthly and per kilometer rates that our members pay, we pay our staff salaries, we pay our insurance and our lease costs and everything else that you would expect.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there are no further questions, Mr. Hammond. Thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Fernandez, question.
Sorry,
Mr. Hammond, there's a late starter in questions.
You've had questions from everybody, so in fairness, I think I should just, throw out a question. Sorry. The only thing I didn't understand is you've told us how many cars you've had, where you are. Did you give us the number of members you've had and how they've grown in the last 2 to 3 years?
Sure. The number of members is growing faster than the number of cars. We're finding efficiencies there, and also faster than the number of staff. So proportionally, we're becoming more efficient, but we now have about 1,050 members and 37 vehicles.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And I was just going to say I was happy to see the sheet up here that you were going to appear as a delegation, because I knew there would be some valuable questions to be asked. So thank you for coming in. Okay, with that, we'll move to questions of staff, and we've been on this item for a while. I'd like to see a motion on the table sometime soon. Councillor Singh.
Thank you. And so question of staff was, one of the questions that was raised by, was about the financial report for the organization. I know in the caucus item there was a summary. I won't speak to the particulars, but it was there. So there was a question raised why that was not provided. So I want to make light that there was some information. Would there be a hindrance to provide more detailed financial report to council?
Mr. Haggie?
Through the chair, as far as we're concerned, that's fine, but yeah, I guess I would look to CarShare whether they want to share that information.
Okay, all right. I think that that should be asked, as I think it's appropriate to defer this item. I was on the same school of thought as Councillor Glenn Graham, so if he's going to move that forward, I think we do need to get some additional information. This is an important organization in our community, especially towards, of course, helping with our transportation demand management. So I think that would be appropriate to have that additional information, as well as the information that was provided as through conversation of a business plan. Was there anything on paper that was given, or was it just through conversation?
Through the chair, that was a discussion. Deborah Fagerdahl, the manager of financial planning, has been the point person on this. And so it's a conversation with CarShare staff and her. We have not received anything, a concrete document that could be forwarded on. We haven't received anything along those lines.
I'll allow that for Councillor Glenn Graham to include that in the deferral. I think it would be appropriate to ask something more detailed as to their detailed plan.
And the delegation did mention that they don't have a formalized business plan, largely because the unpredictable nature going forward of the industry. So I'm not sure what we'll be asking for, but if it's in depth, then I think. Sorry, can you actually, if you wanted to, Councillor Singh, do you want to comment?
I'm just saying pretty much whatever there was a conversation with staff for that to be articulated to council. We weren't privy to that one-on-one conversation. So there may be details that was involved that may not be particularly in the report that would be helpful for council to decide why it's important to increase the line of credit from the 30 to the 50. So if there's anything missed, that's what I'm saying. You would know. If there's anything already missed in the report that was provided to council that you think would be beneficial for council to hear, I think those comments would be appropriate to forward as part of the deferral.
Okay, thank you. In fairness to get a motion on the table, I'm going to jump to Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thanks very much. And my question is to staff. The current contract expires on the 30th of April, is that correct?
Yes.
So what would the turnaround time be if we brought this forward to committee on the 28th and then were able to approve it at a special council meeting? Would it be sufficient time?
Ms. Scheer?
I could have an amendment drafted and it would be signed, it could be signed as soon as council approves it.
So that wouldn't be a barrier then?
No.
Legally? Okay. All right, then I will bring forward the motion to defer. The request to CarShare is to talk about the efficiencies that you're achieving through with the growth and the number of staff. You've alluded to that and you've done a good job. You've spoken a little bit about it. You're just hiring a fifth. So if you could talk about the projected growth and the growth of staff and your expenses. We're not looking, it doesn't have to be a commitment, but it looks to be a projection, your best guess, and it just gives us some comfort around that. Also, if you're willing to disclose, as Councillor Gazzola said, your financials, that would be of benefit as well, because you are asking for money from the public through the city, and I think that would be helpful for us to be transparent. So anything you can disclose along those two lines, bringing it back on April 28th at committee would be my recommendation. So I'll leave it at that.
I'll actually I'm going to allow some brief comments beforehand, before I let the deferral come forward. In fairness, if folks could please keep their questions and comments as brief as possible. We're dragging on this item. Councillor Fernandez.
Thanks. I don't really have a question, but I do have a concern about deferring this. I don't want this organization to have their back up against a wall. Is there any reason why that information can't be brought to us in special council next week? So that is a question of staff, isn't it?
I think, do we need to go to CarShare to answer that question?
Yeah, through the chair, I think the additional information requests are essentially all of CarShare. As far as staff are concerned, I don't think that we have a whole lot of additional information to provide or additional input that we need to provide. So it's essentially, when does CarShare believe they can get that information prepared?
Okay. Could we?
Yes.
They're not in their head, yes. Okay, great. So, in all due respect to Councillor Glenn Graham, I wonder if maybe we should be asking for all of that information to make a decision next week in special council.
And I'm seeing from Councillor Glenn Graham, that's fine. So
okay, all right. So then that would be part of Councillor Glenn Graham's motion. And you want comments now as well?
Sure, please.
Okay. So.
Sorry, point of order has been called, Mayor Zaire.
We need the motion first in order to defer it. So I think Councillor Fernandez was going to be putting forward a motion. That has to come before a deferral.
Yeah, there's no motion on the floor, so, right.
Oh, I thought that Councillor Glenn Graham put a motion on the floor.
Right.
I'm moving the motion, the recommendation on the first page, which is the 30,000, the credit for 5 years, the interest rate, and the yearly audited statements.
Thank you. I was confusing defer and refer, but that's fine. So yes, you want to go ahead with your comments now then.
Okay. So notwithstanding, some of the concerns regarding the financial statements and the lack thereof, the history of this organization has been, in my opinion, extremely outstanding. They've increased their revenues, they've increased their assets, they've increased their visibility, not just in the region, but in a much broader range. By not supporting this, we're going to be hampering a great organization that has looked forward from the very beginning to where we recognize people can live without owning their own vehicle. So I really hope that we will support this next week. Philosophically, we have supported it in the past. I think we need to continue to support it, and I think they are correct. They're growing their membership, and if there's anything that maybe that would be their negative, is that they are purchasing cars and assets, which unfortunately on a balance sheet looks like a negative in their position, but the reality is that they are growing, they are expanding, and I look forward to the day when I can say, I'm carless and I'm a member of CarShare. So I hope that that's where we're going to go with this.
Thank you. Councillor Galloway-Seelock.
Yeah, I think we're missing the important point here, and I'm happy to see that it may only be deferred till next Monday, but I will not support the deferral. The important point here is that they're asking for a loan that they've paid over and over and over again. I don't need more information because they're doing their part. They're paying what they say they're going to pay within the term that they say they're going to pay it. So they have a perfect track record. So whether or not they grow or not, it's not our risk, it's their risk. They have a board in place that oversees their projections and their growth. They're the ones at the end of the day that are responsible. The risk to the city in the long run is $30,000 if they can't pay. They've shown that they can pay, and they're not asking for a grant. And a lot of organizations would come and ask for money. And they could come and ask for $10,000 over the next 3 years, and we'd still probably give it to them, but we wouldn't be repaid, and we wouldn't make any money on the interest, which we get paid everything back. I'm totally supportive of the direction that staff are going with this. I don't need a deferral. I have enough information. I'm confident in the CarShare and the fact that they've been able to grow and expand over the last number of years, the last 16 years they've been running. I think it's great for our community, it's great for our environment, and I applaud their efforts. And therefore, I will not support the deferral, even though it's coming till Monday, because I firmly believe that I can make a decision today, and I'll support that decision again next Monday.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Galloway-Seelock. I'm against the deferment. I don't need a deferral on this. In fact, I would support increasing the line of credit. So I guess I can live with a deferment through till Monday, but I see no reason for it. Through you, Mr. Chair, I think this is an excellent service, and I was on the 401 several times between Thursday and the weekend, and it's a nightmare. So anything that can be done to improve on that, I would be supportive of. And I know a little about CarShare, and I think it is an excellent service, worthy of the 50,000 rather than the 30,000.
Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. And I think there is no question that the benefits of a community CarShare organization to the city, and as any financer, you look at the record of the individual organization you're lending money to, and they have shown a positive and great record for repayment history. And that should give us confidence to continue on our relationship with them with the current 30,000. But there are some pieces missing. I think it's prudence financially that we look at all details before we make a final decision. It doesn't speak to our lack of support. Absolutely. We need to create and develop this relationship further, but we have to show financial prudence. And I think it's important to look at the entire picture before we finally make that decision. And it's appropriate for us to look at that, and deferring by a week, I think it only makes financial sense. And that's why I think I would absolutely support the deferral to next week.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I want to start off by saying that I can see the merits of this operation and this type of operation. I have seen it. It's a lot like the bike share that I've seen in Montreal and Ottawa, and these things work very very well, and I theoretically it should work with cars. The problem I have, I will support a deferral. Quite frankly, I would prefer to see the deferral till April the 28th, but that's because of my personal reasons. But there's still a lot of information that we do not have, that I think, as bankers, that information should be before us. I know it's, I know that they are growing, but from information I have seen, so are other not positive parts of a growing company involved. And, we need to be aware of those things. We need to take those things into account. For example, I understand there's all kinds of branches all over the province. Are they all incorporated, for example, under this Kitchener branch, or are they all separate branches? And this whole question of a business case should be on the table. Yes, there are greater risks in coming up with estimates for this type of a business case, but nonetheless, a business case should be there. And it can be discounted if there are uncertainties. But if we know that the ridership is going to increase, we should be able to prepare business cases. So I will support the deferral. I would prefer deferral till even a later date so that we get all of the information that we require and deserve to have. Other than that, it is a good thing to be looking at. It has. I gather it's met all its obligations in the past. Apparently, it has with the city of Kitchener, but do we know if it has with all of its creditors? We don't know all of that. So, I will support the deferral.
Councillor Ioannidis?
There's no doubt in my mind that Grand River Car Share is a value-added service to our community, and I know it's even through when I was campaigning 4 years ago, there was a lot of opinions on whether or not the municipality should be doing some type of service without even knowing what Grand River Car Share was about. So I see the value there, and I'm totally very supportive of it. I don't really think we really need to defer this. I think it has a proven track record, but I can only go as far as recommending what staff has approved with the 30,000, because I know it may be a standard practice of being 50% growth, but I think we still need to be a little cautious, because it is very aggressive. And if you compare that to any other industry, I think we need to still take some caution. And even though they're not giving you any evidence of being unworthy of it, but it's just, I think we still need to be a little bit cautious, and I'm not prepared to support the deferral. I'm prepared to move forward with the recommendation that's been put forward by the staff report.
Okay. Before going to Councillor Glenn Graham, I'll comment briefly. I think the term grant was thrown around, which is, I think, completely inappropriate. This has been a loan. At one point, that was 10% that they've paid back. And they have nothing outstanding at present, as I understand. I'm also confident in having enough information, the financials that we received in caucus, to make a decision on this today. So I won't be supporting the deferral, but just in the interest of speeding things up, I will state if this does fail and a motion does come forward. I believe in the car share model, I really do. I have some concerns about, I think they're being a bit too aggressive. So I would support the staff recommendation with the exceptions of I would want to see a 2-year term, so the next term of council can look at this again and possibly increase if they hit their aggressive targets. And I would also, giving back a little bit, I would like to see the short-term rates versus the long-term rates over the 2-year period. So I will now go to Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thanks very much, Chair Davey. And I just want to be clear that I'm bringing forward the deferral till the April 14th meeting at Council in the interest of transparency to have the financials put forward before us because, as Councillor Gonzalez said, it is public money, and as well to have something of a business plan. I am fully supportive of CarShare to the extent that I would be willing to support the $50,000. So I want to be clear that it's not a question of support, it's a question of transparency and process. And I do think we do owe it to the citizens and to ourselves to ensure that we have all that publicly disclosed. So I really would love to say right now that we have that information that we can share publicly. We don't. And you know what? They have done a great job of developing this as an asset. We subsidize a lot of other things in this community that we have said we have an interest in, between arts and culture and community groups. And through the region, we subsidize our public transit. And this is one way that the city can contribute towards a public transit model that is active and has been proven to be successful. So I will be supportive of it. It's a question of to what degree, and I would just like to be as clear as possible with the citizens about what we're supporting. That's why I'm moving for a deferral. That's why I would ask for support. It doesn't cost us anything to defer to next Monday.
Okay, recorded vote's been called. So this is on the deferral till council. The voting is open. Okay, those in favor? Opposed? And the motion is lost in a tie vote, so I would be looking for a... Oh, there is a motion on the floor already, actually. That's correct. Sorry, Councillor Fernandez's motion is on the floor. Any comments? Or the motion is the one as written. So it would be for, and correct me if I'm wrong, you can look on pages 3.2 and 3.3. Everything with a check mark beside it is the recommendation by staff. So it would be for $30,000. It would be for 5 years and at the long-term interest rates. Okay. Comments, or sorry, we want to keep this as brief as possible, so Councillor Fernandez?
Actually, no, I was just going to reiterate the motion, so I'll just leave it.
Okay. Councillor Glenn Graham?
I'd like to move an amendment to a 2-year term and $50,000.
Okay, so there's an amendment for 2 years and $50,000. And I don't see anything else. Mayor's there.
I'll speak against the amendment. I think that we are continuing to support them at the 30,000, and I like the recommendation that has come forward. I will not support the amendment, but will support the original motion.
Okay, very good. So we're going to vote on the amendment first. The amendment is to change it to $50,000 and 2-year term. And a recorded vote's been called. This is on the amendment. Is everyone clear on the amendment? Okay. Okay, those in favor? And opposed? Okay, the amendment is lost. So we're now back to the original motion. Okay. Right. So has there been a recorded vote called in this? Yeah, so a recorded vote's been called. Those in favor? And opposed? Motion carries. Okay, very good. We will move on to the final item, which is the downtown annual report. Mr. Bloom.
Thank you. Through the chair, just for council's recollection, 2 years ago we endorsed the Downtown Action Plan, which is a 5-year joint action plan led by the city and the BIA with our many partners. This action plan is the primary tool for doing really two things. One is acting on the community priority within our Kitchener strategic plan to build a dynamic downtown. And it's also our tool for making sure we're capitalizing and seeing the greatest spin-off from our EDIF investments. So we've committed every year, this is the second year now, the action plan's been in place for 2 years, to report back to you guys with the progress so far. So if you don't have this document, if you didn't bring it with you today and you'd like a copy, let me know, and we have staff that can send you or can distribute one to you right now. Really, the document is meant to do two things. One, it's a progress report, and it tells you about the work that we as the city and BIA have done. But more importantly, it's also a celebration of the many successes of our community members and our partners. So if I start with just the some of the successes from the city and the BIA. In 2013, there were some significant accomplishments that you all know, but I'll just recount that the new Waterloo Region Courthouse opened up. We installed new bike racks and super sharrows on King Street, which is we were one of the first communities, I think, in North America to do so. We turned the Duke Street parking garage into a piece of art. We brought to close and are near completion of the Civic District parking garage. We completed the downtown financial incentive review. The BIA themselves completed their own strategic planning exercise to better align themselves with our action plan. And lastly, we hosted a night art market, and what was notable about that event was that the community response we got from that was, in fact, that they want to see more activity and more events at night as opposed to during the day, which, if you can all recall downtown Kitchener 10 years ago, we probably would not have seen that kind of community response 10 years ago. But more importantly, there were some significant accomplishments by the community. Notably, the City Centre condos in 1 Victoria both broke ground last year. We saw the Simpson block redeveloped, which is home to Matter of Taste, CBC, Vidyard, and others. We saw the dramatic enhancement to 24 Charles, which is now home to Thalmic Labs. And we also saw the beginning of the conversion of the Delta Hotel into the Crown Plaza Hotel. So some significant significant accomplishments from our private sector. But as a community at large, what we tried to encompass in the document really, which is, I think, the two major themes that we saw emerge from last year downtown, which is startups and art. That both tech startups and food startups, there was significant growth last year. For example, Communitech grew from having 90 startups to 120 startups in their facilities, and it was the first year that they were starting to graduate startup companies, and many of them landed downtown, which is important. I think one of the nicest stories from last year is one of those companies actually asked their staff of 13, where do you want to move? They had options to move to to other places in the region that would have costed them less, and then they could have given their staff more benefits. And the staff unanimously chose to stay downtown, even though it would be a more expensive workspace and less benefits to themselves. So I think that is a very telling story about the progress that's happening downtown. We also saw some significant advancements again in terms of food entrepreneurs, more restaurants again last year. And we also saw significant advancements in our arts and culture sector, whether that's the opening of a store like Artisan Zone, which now sells local artwork, or significant events, whether it was events that the museum hosted, some of the exhibitions that they put on, enhancements to Centre in the Square, as well as probably the other major story from last year was the creation of the event called a Night Shift, which was an arts-based event in November, running all night long. And again, the community response was that they actually are now embracing downtown at night and want more events downtown. We do, just one last note on the action plan, if you flip to page 19 of the annual report, we have done our best to try to statistically evaluate how well we're doing.
So we created 6 indexes, which you can see last year's score in black in the small text, and it shows you this year's score, which gives us a bit of an evaluation, are we on the right track or not. What you can see is we made significant advancements in 2 of the categories. The physical experience of King Street, which I think can be attributed to some changes we made last year in how we look after the street. And we also saw some significant gains in the category of collaborative community, which basically means that the community isn't just coming downtown, but they're actually engaging in membership-based groups, in activities, and in programming that is not simply coming as a spectator. We did see some small retractions in the social experience on King Street and people activity on King Street, and when we looked at the statistics as to why that was, a lot of that was driven by the fact that our event numbers are down due to the heat and the weather of last year. 2 of our events were virtually rained out, and a number of them had happened in very hot times. So by and large, I say we were still on track, but we saw some great movement on 2 of those 6 categories. So with that, we're simply looking for Council's endorsement of the annual report, and myself, as well as Shannon Weber, the Executive Director of the BIA, are here if there's any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bloom. At present, I have 4 questions. Councillor Glenn Graham.
Actually, you answered my question, Corey, and just about the concern about the social experience, and because I thought it was stronger than ever, but I guess that was during the times that the weather was cooperative. But I'm happy to bring, I guess this is just for information, is that right? This is
There's a recommendation to be endorsed.
Okay, so then I will move the recommendation. I think that what I really like about this, if I could just make a very brief comment, is that the pictures of real people and real events. I think it's fantastic. We have a lot to celebrate here.
And you said you moved that, Councillor Glenn Graham? Very good. Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, I have a number of questions. So I just saw Councillor Gazzola and Councillor Ioannidis walk in with the coloured packages. Who is getting these booklets?
Through the chair, we've given each councillor a copy. The BIA pays to distribute it to their membership, and then we provide it to those that ask, which is our advisory committees, neighborhood associations, some of the private sector partners we deal with. We typically provide it on an as requested basis.
Could you give me an idea of how much it costs to produce that?
The book itself costs about $3 to $4 to publish, which is to actually print the materials, which is why this year we've gone to an online version as well, and our hope is to distribute more of it through online means as opposed to the printed copy. But each copy is about $4.
About $4, and how many? Do you have any idea what the first print was?
Just for the ones that we distribute, not including the ones at the BIA, we print off 100, and usually that gets us through the year, especially if we're pushing the online version more so.
Okay, so are you using this as a marketing tool?
Through the chair, it does play that role. I mean, I think really it's a community building tool more so than anything. Is it's really celebrating the successes of the community, not necessarily the city and the BIA, but really just telling the stories of some of the champions downtown and the people that are doing some amazing things.
Okay. When I look at page 4-21, you have some indicators here, and this is just the second year that you're using these indicators. Who came up with these indicators? Like, what kind of a scale, or what's your scoring? How do you come up with the scoring for this?
So through the chair, what we did was for each of these 6 categories, we went and looked at all of the data that we could access across a variety of different fields, some that we collect ourselves, some that are available through other partners and organizations, as well as an annual survey that we do. And we essentially tried to make sure we had somewhere between 8 to 15 indicators within each score. So under King Street Physical Experience, it's an 8.3, which means that's reflective of anywhere from 8 to 15 different statistic points. These are stats that we knew we could generate every year, or we could access every year, so that we're evaluating year over year on a sort of apples to apples basis. So it was a wide variety. We tried to give you an idea underneath the number of what some of those indicators are, but there's a whole host under each one.
Well, and that's kind of why I was asking that, because, I mean, safety perception is a very subjective comment.
Yeah.
How do you rate that? I mean, do you ask people, you know, how do you feel safe? How safe do you feel in the downtown Kitchener, 1 to 10?
Through the chair. So that part would have been what gets collected through our annual survey, and in that case, there are a number of. We don't ask them 1 to 10. We ask them. There's I think 5 different items that they can select. Everything from I feel safe all the time to I don't feel safe ever. And there's sort of a rated score, and then depending on what they pick would. So if they said they're safe all the time, that gives them that would be a 10 out of 10, and a 0 out of 10 if it was never safe. And so those results translate into a number, which gets blended into the final score.
Okay, I guess my only concern is, you know, directly across from City Hall, we're looking at 3 empty storefronts and 1 empty lot. I'm wondering how that fits into how we did in 2013. You talked about we increased restaurants, but how many did we lose any as well? So those are some of the things that I guess I'd be interested in understanding as well.
Through the chair, so in a number of these categories, for example, one of the categories we actually do a manual count, where we count how many vacancies and empty lots do we have versus filled spaces, and that produces a score that gets built into one of these indexes. So yeah, we've tried to provide as many data points within each category that gives it a full reflection of the entire downtown. And tried to weight them accordingly so that they were weighted to be reflective of what we would assume the community perception or perspective would be.
Okay, so how many vacancies do we have? Do you know?
In terms of vacancies and lot vacancies, I think probably we are at about 15 to 20% on King Street in terms of retail. We have far less vacancy off of King Street.
Okay, and I'm cognizant of my time, but just one comment, I guess, question. You're talking about the installation of the cycling infrastructure and the bike racks. My understanding is that came through the Cycling Advisory Committee, that initiative. So how do you recognize that? I mean, I understand the advisory committee is an advisory committee of council and committee. Through the City of Kitchener, but I guess this kind of looks a little bit like it was the BIA and other staff who initiated this. When sitting on that committee, It was them.
Well, I mean, through the chair, certainly our staff had a significant role in laying out those programs. But more importantly, as I said, this annual report is not meant to be a reflection of just the city and the BIA. This is really a celebration of all of our community partners, and I think they are certainly one of those partners. And that's hopefully how this document is perceived, as not just what the city's done, but really what the community's done.
Okay, and I appreciate that. I just guess we're constantly being challenged by community members. You know, what is the Cycling Advisory Committee doing? What's their outputs? You know, there are community members who are expecting certain outputs from our advisory committees, and it might be kind to the Cycling Advisory Committee to acknowledge that they're part in that particular situation.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks. That's all my questions.
Councillor Etherington?
Yeah, a couple of questions, Corey. One has to do with, at the most basic physical level, what are you doing in way of downtown cleanup of sidewalks, and that's recognizing we've just been through a long winter and the snow is just disappearing. But can you tell me a little about, have you increased the downtown cleaning?
So through the chair, there's a number of different. There's a different approach we took last year. So, for example, we partnered in the past with the BIA on the Ambassador program. We actually scaled back our contribution to that program and used those dollars to fund 2 street cleaners who were 2 gentlemen who were out all summer long picking up litter, tending to daily spills and whatnot to keep the street looking better. We also used some of our power washing money, so we have operations as a budget for power washing. And we realized we didn't need to power wash as much as if we could use some of those dollars to put people on the street who are actually cleaning up the litter as it comes. You're sort of negating the need to power wash as often. So we sort of took that approach to get these two individuals, city staff people, to keep the street tidy during the summer months. And then the BIA has augmented that by working with the Working Center to have their job cafe out and helping to clean the street when we don't have our folks. So, yeah, unfortunately, in a week like this, when the snow has just melted and there's lots of debris out, our two gentlemen don't start until later on in May. So between some of our operational crews and the Working Center, they're trying to deal with the what's left over from the snowbanks soon.
Yeah. I think it's vital that we get on top of that as quickly as possible. My other question had to do with you've done, is it one video or a couple of videos in connection with the report?
Yeah. Through the chair, the BIA took the lead on facilitating a number of videos. One has been fully produced, and it was shown at the AGM, and they have a number of other videos that are still in the editing process, but they essentially, if you look at the annual report, all of the major stories, there is a sort of video segment that the community can watch to get really a deeper level of understanding of what some of our community champions are doing.
Who chooses who will be in those videos?
Through the chair, that was probably a joint decision among both city staff and BIA staff, and it was largely just based on, from the two organizations' perspective, who are the folks that were talked about the most last year or made the most significant impact, and we tried to pick it based on that sentiment.
I don't want to get into the detail. I particularly don't want to get into the detail, but I think we should be careful who we use in those videos.
Sure.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, a lot of my questions have been answered. I just want to go back to what this all cost to put together. Could you give me a total cost of what it did to produce these and the videos and all the research that's involved and whatnot?
Sure, through the chair. The production of the actual document itself, including the printing costs that we do, is probably in the range of $750. And that includes some of the photography and whatnot, plus staff time. There's obviously staff time to go into building this. The videos were provided by the BIA. They funded the production of the videos. So for the city's cost, it's about $750 for the production of this document.
That's all it costs the city to do all of this? $750?
Through the chair, yeah, the city took the lead on the document and the BIA took the lead on the videos.
How much staff time might have been involved?
Through the chair, this year, far less. Last year was significant because it was the first time we have done it. This year, if I were to guess, there's probably about 2 weeks worth of two people's time, plus our graphic design and our marketing folks probably spent 2 days on it as well.
Yeah. Now, like all of these amounts that show how we've done, now that must take a bit of time. Do we have history for a number of years to substantiate these figures? That must take a bit of time.
Through the chair, last year it took some time to set up the database, but now that it's been set up this year, all we need to do is go back to those groups providing us the information, and they provide it, and then it's a much more efficient process this year. It's probably down to a half-day exercise to get, once the data is in, to get it put into the system.
A lot of the figures here are indicated as being revised for last year. What caused all the revisions?
Yeah, through the chair, in many instances, we were able to access new data sets this year that we didn't access last year, and we included those if we were able to get last year's data. So you'll see the revisions, and largely that's the case, is that we have a new data set that we had past data on. So it gives more indicators into each of the data points.
How many years do you have data for?
Sorry, I missed that.
I say, how many years do you have data for?
So through the chair, anything that's used in these calculations, we only have for 2012 and 2013. So if we didn't have data in either of those years, we didn't use the indicator we didn't use that statistic in these indices. But we have some data we have going back 20, 30 years, depending on which one it is.
I found one of the questions on page 7 rather interesting. it said that 78.4% responded that new activity downtown has made downtown safer. And to me, that implies that it wasn't safe before. Is that the case?
Through the chair, I would say generally the majority of the community, if you were to have asked them 2 or 3 years ago whether they feel safe downtown all the time, you probably would have got a majority of people who would have suggested that they probably don't feel safe all the time downtown. So for us to see that number go to really about 3/4 of the people feeling much safer downtown, I think that's a positive.
Thank you.
Councillor Ioannidis?
I have more of a comment than...
Yeah, you're the last one, so go ahead.
Okay. For the benefit of the viewers who are watching online, this is simply brilliant. I just want to thank staff for the great work, the BIA for the amazing stuff they've done here. If you look at the current marketing practices in today, and if you're versed on that, you would understand this nails it. Like, you cannot get any more simplistic than this, but tell a perfect story to what downtown is. This is what awesome happens here. Makes me want to go to the Artisan Zone. Makes me want to go to Cava Bean and have a sandwich. Makes me glad that I work downtown. So this is fantastic, and when you pair it with that video, great job. Thank you for your dedication, because this is what I want to see downtown.
Thank you.
Very good. I think we'll leave it at that, and we'll vote on as moved by Councillor Glenn Graham. Those in favour? And there are none opposed. It's carried unanimously. Thanks, Carter.
Thank you.
So there is one actual final item. There should be a motion in front of everyone. Councillor Fernandez, and I will go to you to bring it forward.
Thank you. This was mentioned last week at Council. It is my request for a report from staff, and I'll read the recommendation that staff be directed to provide a report to a future Finance and Corporate Services Committee meeting outlining the rationale for the 2013 consulting costs between $25,000 and $100,000 by vendor, as well as further information on the costs associated with the items under $25,000 by vendor, which do not require the approval of a City of Kitchener Council. I would like to speak to this for a minute. When I first became a councillor, I noticed that year, 2010, we had used consultant costs of over $5 million. It dipped down a little bit over the last couple of years, but it really popped up again this year. And my concern is that we're specifically the 25,000 and under area that totaled $500,000, close to $500,000. I really would like to understand why we're hiring consultants for the small amounts. We have an abundance of staff. We have staff that are experts and go above and beyond again and again and again. So I really am a little bit puzzled, and I really would like to understand better where those costs are and why they're happening. I'm not trying to micromanage here. I really think it's prudent for us to understand where those costs are and why they're happening. So I've been assured that it's not a real time-consuming objective to do this. I'd like to see support from committee today on this motion.
Okay, I have queued Mr. Wilmer in, but I have 3 questions here. We'll start with Councillor Singh.
Yes, I actually have a question of Councillor Fernandez as well. The way the motion is framed, so the staff be directed to provide a report on future Finance Corporate Services Committee outlining the rationale for 2013 consulting costs between $25,000 and $100,000 by a vendor, as well further information. So are you saying as well as further information, or are you requiring that a report be prepared for the rationale for any vendor contractor necessary below $25,000?
Oh, pardon me.
Or are you just saying further information provided to council, which...
Well, I mean, we were able, staff was able to provide a number of consulting explanations, but there were a number from under 100 to 25,000 that there was no explanation of what those consulting costs were. Additionally, when I saw that we were paying upwards of close to $500,000 in consulting fees for items under 25,000, it really started to raise the question in my mind as to what are we paying? What consulting fees are we paying for items that are under 25? I mean, are they $5,000? Are they $10,000? How many items are there? Is there an ability for us to not pay for consultants and have staff do the work?
Councillor Fernandez, what are you asking to staff to do? Go forward. Are you asking for a report every time something is necessary for $500? Are you asking
No. I'm asking for a fuller understanding on the consulting costs, which is it's pretty basic outlined here.
So of all I guess of all the contracts that were issued for consultants,
right, for
last year,
right, for
under 25,000,
and the gap between the 10 and 25, the 125,000 as well. They were able to provide some, but not all of them.
Okay.
It was because I believe it was because my request came pretty quickly, and Mr. Chapman was very kind in providing some information, but he requested that I ask committee support.
Okay. I have a question of staff as well, but Mr. Chair, I think it'd be appropriate to hear from Mr. Wilmer. I think he queued in too before we ask further questions, because it may answer the question I have. So.
Mr. Wilmer, to comment?
Thank you. Through the chair, the only reason we ever use consultants is when we need expertise that we do not have, or we need capacity that we do not have. So if we have capacity and expertise, we use our own staff. On the matter of consulting costs under $25,000, we work within budgets that are set by council.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez, you can just stay queued in case there's further questions. Mayor Zaire?
Thanks very much. Yes, I do have some questions for Councillor Fernandez. Use of the word rationale for the costs between 25 and 100,000. What do you mean by rationale? Because the explanations, I think, are always there in terms of the reports. We already have already seen every one of those over 25,000 by virtue of a resolution at council. So I'm not sure what rationale means.
When I'm speaking rationale, I'm probably speaking more to the items under 25,000 than the ones between 25 and 100. I just would like to be reminded of who we hired as a consultant in the range of the 25,000 to 100,000. The rationale would be understanding how many other consultants we are hiring in the 25,000 and under range, and how frequently we do. I understand that we're doing this because we may require additional expertise. I'm not sure about the capacity. Maybe we need to understand that a little bit further.
So the word rationale, as the recommendation here is, or your motion, is that it pertains to the 25 to 100,000. That's not what you mean?
Well, this was. I confess to having clerks help me with this motion, so that I was
well, I'm
clear.
just trying to get clarification.
Actually,
that's not what you answered to my question.
I'm going to unclick you, Mr. Wilmer. Mr. Chapman, did you want to comment?
In discussion with Mr. Goody, my understanding is that Councillor Fernandez is looking for the same explanation for items between $25,000 and $100,000 that was provided for those over $100,000, and then simply a listing of the consultants that were used for the many activities below 25,000.
Okay, so in this case then,
yes.
Councillor Fernandez, rationale is what it was for,
right? Not
necessarily we used X consultant for $26,000 because this, and this. The listing that you were referring to, I believe, had simply what it was for.
Right.
Is that what you're asking?
Right. I mean, I think that Mr. Chapman really encapsulated exactly what I'm asking for.
Okay. So, rationale to me means, I just want to be clear on what it means, because that normally would mean why we did this. It wasn't just a fact. It was all
I understand that.
Okay.
And this may at least open the door, should there be any additional questions from members of council, that once they see that the list has been populated properly, then if any further questions want to come from council, then they can ask those questions of staff. But I really would like the information, general information, as Mr. Chapman just stated, for all of us to see.
Okay. And then just to continue my question, so I understand what you mean now. So it's just what the purpose was rather than rationale, what the purpose of it was for. And the items under 25,000, you're asking for just the listing or also the rationale?
I would be comfortable with just the listing at this point in time.
Okay. I have two questions for staff. I can ask them now.
Please. And sorry, Mr. Wilmer, do you want to comment? I had you. Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Mayor's there.
In terms of how these payments are coded, what types of things could potentially get caught up in the term consultants, and how low do they go in terms of dollar value?
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, we're running a report based on a general ledger code that's called Consulting and Professional Services. So it would include consulting costs that I believe are the definition that Councillor Fernandez is looking for, but a number of other professional services. And I've just glanced at some of the detail for items below $25,000. And I do see in there, for example, that we have amounts, of $100 at a time for performers that may perform at an event at the market or something like that. So I don't think those fall under the classic definition of consultant. And we'll have to clean some of that up as we bring that list back to council, because I don't think those are really intended to form part of the direction to staff. So I would suggest there are a number of those items below 25,000 that were not cleaned up for this purpose, but would not meet the definition that Councillor Fernandez has outlined.
Okay. And what sort of additional time would be required, including making up the list in the first place, and to provide explanations?
Dealing with the two parts, there are 17 items between $25,000 and $100,000, so we'll have to look at the individual purchase orders to identify what the projects were, because in some cases a consultant was involved in more than one project. So I would estimate a few hours for those items. And for items under $25,000, there will be dozens of items there. And again, we'll have to go through the list to understand what comprises those amounts. So I would estimate a few hours, up to a half day perhaps on that.
Okay, I think those are my only questions. I have comments, so I'll hold on.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. And Mayor Zaire kind of helped clarify where I was going as well. I wasn't sure if you were looking at rationale or listing of items below the 25,000. And Mr. Chapman, you're saying, and Councillor Fernandez did provide clarity that she's not asking for explanation, she's just asking a listing of, and it would take half a day just to populate a list of all those that were hired based on contract for whatever reason below 25,000.
Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, as I've indicated, it's a fairly broad definition for that GL, and so you'll have a number of costs there that are not consulting costs under the definition that Councillor Fernandez has identified. So I think we owe it to council to understand what's there ourselves and separate out things that may not represent true consulting costs that may be in there simply because they are professional services.
Okay, all right. And if a council member has any questions, even if this was not asked, would staff have had any issue to divulge that information or provide clarity?
Not at all, and the only reason this is before council, I indicated to Councillor Fernandez that we could likely provide detail for the high-value items fairly quickly, and we did that, but there's a significant time requirement, more significant time requirement to go to this level of detail, and typically that's required a motion of council.
Okay, and the explanations that were provided that was for items above 25,000 to below 100,000, correct?
So we provided a list of all vendors between 25,000 and above, and then descriptions for costs above $100,000.
Okay, all right. I would have some comments afterwards, but I think it would be helpful to narrow down the guidelines for the list, or even listing of those items below the 25,000, so that we can limit the required time that staff would have to dedicate for this. You would know more, Councillor Fernandez, as this is your motion. So would look for you to add some clarity to that aspect of it.
Do you want me to respond? Just think about it for a moment. We'll move on. Councillor Glenn Graham.
excuse me, just briefly, Mr. Wilmer, it wouldn't be difficult to say which of the two buckets the rationale fell into, capacity or expertise, if that was attached to the explanation, would it?
Mr. Wilmer?
I can't speak for the financial analysts who will be doing this work. The difficulty is, in order to get informed input on that, now you're going to get a financial analyst and another staff person involved, maybe an engineering project manager or one of the other managers elsewhere in the organization. So it shouldn't likely be difficult, but it does involve more people and take more of our time. I guess the question that's bothering me is I'm not sure what value is added here. You've already entrusted us to make these decisions. We've made them. You entrust us to work within the budgets that you set, and we do so. These costs have already been incurred. And so while we've got nothing to hide and have no difficulty sharing the information, I guess the question is, how much detail do you really want to get into, and how much time do you want to spend to provide that information?
Councillor Galloway-Seelock?
Yeah. So we have a number that's saying $500,000 is for the vendors under $25,000. Is that correct? That's correct. Okay. So you're suggesting that some of those are artist fees and different things like that. So the actual consulting piece of it could be far less than $500,000.
Mr. Chapman?
Once we tease it all out, if we tease it all out.
That's possible. I suspect still the majority of those costs will be consulting, but we haven't done that analysis to separate them out.
Okay. All my other questions were asked.
Okay. I guess we'll move to comments now then. I don't have, or I guess, let me pause for 1 second. In terms of the timing and just in following up on Councillor Singh's request, would it take less time if we were to narrow the parameters, say, instead of doing everything like looking at the $100 items, like having the lower end cap at like $5,000 to $25,000? Mr. Chapman?
Through the chair, absolutely would. My sense is that there are a few larger value items in that list, but I would suspect the median is probably closer to $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. So if you were to set a limit around there, it would probably reduce the work effort by around half.
Okay, very good. And question, I guess, of Councillor Fernandez then. I don't want to restrict collecting the information. I have some concern with the items over $25,000, certainly, because we've already approved them. But I guess my question in terms, and relating back to Mr. Wilmer's comments on how much time you want to take on this, have you considered possibly having this, released publicly and emailed to council, but not having it come back as a specific item to a future committee?
No, I haven't thought about that, but because I think that it should be a public information for the most part. It's dollars that we are spending that are taxpayers' dollars. I would support the idea of anything under $5,000 not being itemized or listed out. I think that's a reasonable request. But I've asked this a number of times over my term of council. It comes down to that I don't believe we've ever done this. We've ever had a real good eye on some of these lower costing consulting professional fees, and I think that there's no reason for us not to have that if, as staff says, there's nothing to hide. Yes, we have approved the consultant professional fees above $25,000, but I think there's no reason why we shouldn't have an opportunity just to have an extra pair of eyes on this.
Okay. We'll move into comments. Councillor Singh.
Yes, thank you. So that's good that you're, I guess, altering your motion to limit it to $25,000 to $5,000 only, and I'll include the anything below that. I think that that helps considerably because there are probably a lot of items that it's very clear to say that they're necessary things that you would not raise any concern. I think as a level of transparency, I have no issue with it. I welcome it. I think the public should always be aware as to all the dollars and cents and how they're managed and spent. It's not to question or micromanage the activities of staff. This is just allows for transparency. The issue comes forward where we're asking for repeated rationale. The reason why I say repeated rationale is obviously reports were generated for items above 25,000. I think it's more appropriate if you are asking for additional information to be included going forward, but as a one-time, I think it's fine to ask that, but I think we have to ensure that we add clarity to the process after this information is received if you think there are pieces missing with the information that is made available to council. We have to ensure that we don't hinder the work that staff does. It's one thing to be vigilant, and it's another to lay hurdles. As long as the information is readily available to the public, as long as staff are forthcoming with providing information to council when questions are asked, I think the process is appropriate. So I welcome seeing this information, and if there are additional questions, I would take the necessary steps to contact the appropriate staff and ask those myself.
Mayor Zaire?
Thanks very much. In the motion as it now reads, I'm wondering if, given the discussion that's gone on so far, that the word rationale could be changed to the word purpose. I think it means something quite different, and from Councillor Fernandez's explanation, I think. So I throw that out as a potential amendment to it. In the case of the items between 25,000 and 100,000, I think this is totally redundant, because every time that a contract comes forward for anything over 25,000, we have already seen it. It is there. We approve it or we don't. And we know that there are many questions on this when it comes to the tenders. So I think that's a total waste of time to have that listed yet again. In terms of the, first of all, the use of consultants, it's not an evil thing. And yet it always gets a bad rap because it's money spent. And we should very clearly be concerned about our money spent, and we are doing it within the confines of our budget. And like the item I spoke about earlier on, in saying that comment can be made that this is a matter of transparency and accountability. Well, the accountability of this council comes when we deal with the budget and approve individual items that are within our responsibility for contracts that come to us. That's accountability. That's transparency. From my question, I understand that earlier on was that there are some types of expenditures that are within that under 25,000 that are as low as $100 or $200, which I think is ridiculous that this council gets concerned with that, because that, more than even $1,000 or a $20,000 item, is the responsibility of our staff. We have delegated the authority for these items. If they're within budget, management has responsibility for that. If someone from the outside, other than council, collectively, was asking for this information, we would say file a Freedom of Information request. There would be a cost to that. And I think that all of us around this table say everything is available to the public except for those confidential items that we all know about. And so it's not a matter of not wanting to give the information. It's drawing the line in terms of where is management's responsibility, where is council's responsibility. And at the end of the day, you say, to what purpose is this secondary list under the 25 to be there? And it will be said for transparency purposes, but I've already commented on that. It speaks, in my mind, it speaks to the lack of confidence that this council or individual members of council have in staff. If you want to have responsibility for approving much smaller amounts, then change the 25,000. I don't agree with that for obvious reasons, but that's where you're really moving to. I cannot support the recommendation, notwithstanding the change that I've suggested and the comments that have already been made, because of the fundamental issue of no value, no additional value in this. You either are or want to be part of management and administration, but management and administration is there to implement the decisions of council and the policies of council. It's council's responsibility to make the policy. And I will, even through the media, it'll probably be, could be interpreted that I am totally opposed to having more information for the public. That will be, if that comes out, that'll be so ludicrous, because I don't believe that. But there is a line in the sand that needs to be drawn in how, at which time council and councillors get involved with management issues. If you want to do that, apply for a job at the City of Kitchener.
Councillor Glenn Graham.
Thanks very much. And I just would like to say, in response to Mayor Zaire, that this is, to me, an investment in our education as councillors, because for me, I like to look at the big picture, and I see where Councillor Fernandez is going with this. This is not something we're asking for every time. This is looking at it from a term point of view and looking at what is the trend, and it's certainly not a judgment on the wonderful work staff does. It's something that Councillor Fernandez has expressed an interest in all along, and I think that this motion gets at looking at the picture in a fair and balanced way, not asking staff to go into exorbitant detail, but just trying to understand the trends and seeing the larger picture. So while it might not add value for some, I think it does help us, as a number of councillors are new here, to see the impact of consultants, and perhaps we'll see that this is actually where we should be, and perhaps that's right. And I don't see that the consultants are a bad thing. I do see that we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence, and I think this is a step in that direction.
Councillor Etherington.
Yeah, I wanted to say that I'd be willing to support the request for information between 5 and 25,000. But I would also echo Mayor Zaire's words that if Councillor Fernandez is serious about really getting into this territory in which I trust staff implicitly, I would suggest that she attempt to change the policy that governs those regulated levels, and just see how that makes out with council.
And I'll comment briefly before going back to Councillor Fernandez. I'm kind of torn because I don't really see a ton of value personally in this. I really don't think it's an issue of transparency, but perhaps I guess I'm looking at this as one of those situations where let's do it and let's get out of the way, and then hopefully we won't have to worry about doing this again, because I think it kind of flies in similar to the first item. It kind of flies in the face of efficiency. So I will support, assuming it's the 5,000 to 25,000. I will support it, but I will go to Councillor Fernandez to confirm that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I will change that in my motion. I will change that from rationale to purpose, and under $5,000. And I haven't asked for the $100, the $200, the small little piddly amounts. I mean, that's not professional services, consultant services in the definition that I was thinking. And I appreciate Mr. Chapman's clarification of that. I know that we've had a number of conversations before this in the past, and I thought this was a good time to bring this motion forward. So I really want to in speaking to the idea of changing the policy or the governance, before I do something like that, I like to be able to understand the background and what is happening. I don't want to change a policy and make more work in changing the policy, because it would require, I think, a significant amount of work to do that, when there would be no basis for that. So in bringing this forward and asking for this report, I think it will help myself and possibly other councillors understand the purpose and what consulting fees we are putting out and the cost that we're putting out. And if a motion comes forward after that, well, then I think we'll have a more legitimate rationale. So really, I think it's important for us to understand where our dollars are being spent on this. Regardless of what we do at the budget time, this is a much smaller amount, so it's never been that clear to any of us on that, how that works. So I'm looking forward to seeing support from committee on this.
Okay, with that, the motion has been tabled. Those recorded votes have been called. The voting's open. Those in favor? And opposed? The motion is carried. Okay, so meeting adjourned. Thank you.